It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Why am I slouched over? It's Feedback Friday. Well, the first comment on Feedback Friday that I'm going to read this week has to do with Delilah. Yeah, Delilah, because Zorant00, yeah, here, Delilah. Yeah, Zorant00 said in a comment, "Hey there, Delilah, what it's like being Leanna's kitty. If you sung this comment in the tone of a familiar song, I appreciate you." So I did better than that. We've done a whole song, right, Delilah? Here we go. Ready? Hey there, Delilah, what's it like being Leanna's kitty? Pets 1,000 times a day to the litter box for some... You get it. Yes, you do. Nothing's as quite as cute as you. I swear it's true. Yeah. Hey there, Delilah, don't you worry about the grump face. You're right there in video backgrounds. Give this vid another cat base, big green eyes. Yeah. Your happiness, it's in disguise. We're getting wise. Oh, you're such a cute kitty. 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 Such a cute kitty. Yeah. As you can tell, Delilah likes being the center of attention. There you go, honey. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you're tangled in the wire. Okay. Thank you. So that was Delilah for the week, everyone. There you go. There you go, Zorant00. So the rest of this video is going to be about the key politics at a gaming video, because that was the most comments by a long shot. It wasn't even close. So I'm going to focus on that because it got more comments than everything else this week. And it's not as if the other videos didn't do well. It's just that one blew up. I do appreciate the feedback, the like supportive feedback regarding the why we're too quick to insult awkward guys video, and I wish I could do more stuff on that, but it just, like, when one video just dominates, it's not right to not respond to that. But I will be doing more on that topic in future, even though YouTube kind of flagged it. But yeah, I had to sort of assemble a document of comments because there were just so many, and I tried to sort them kind of into categories, but then I was running out of time today, and I'm like, oh man, okay, I gotta get this done. So I'm gonna get through as many of these as I possibly can, starting with the people who like commented on the greater topic. As much as I love tangents, sometimes we have to stick to the greater topic. Oh, I forgot the patron thing. Okay. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/ShannahK. If you like this sort of content, me singing to my cats. Okay. So, Ascendant Stoic says, political themes are everywhere. They never were a problem because they are abstract and universal most of the time. And most importantly, they aren't accompanied with preaching or propaganda for one specific political party or ideology. Usually they leave it up to the viewer to decide how to feel about the story, situations in the story. That's the opposite of what's happening now. What we're getting in the comics and games is pure blunt political propaganda. If someone wants to go some direct political story, there is a specific genre for that, focusing specifically and explicitly on politics. Books like 1984, Animal Farm, and movies like Selma and Argo. Instead of insidiously inserting partisan politics and propaganda where they don't belong and masking them as political themes when they clearly aren't. And I don't care about what they mean when they say defund the police. I care about what is actually happening on the ground, which is police getting their budget slashed by half, many departments getting disbanded, violent crime rates soaring up, Seattle's first black police chief, Carmen Best, resigning in protest to the budget cuts, some cities even voting to disband their entire police department. That's what defund the police means, full stop. All right, Ascended Stoic, I read that comment because I think, you bring up some fair points. It's not, I get what you're saying. It's not what everybody means, but when they say defund the police, but I get what you're saying about actual impacts. There's a great article on msnbc.com I'm going to link to in this video in the description box if you want a counterpoint written by a black person about defund the police. So I'm putting it there for interest if you're interested in the description box. let's keep going because there are a lot of comments. Carne83 says, I think there's two problems that lead to keep politics out of gaming. The first is that what we're looking at is a huge complex list of things. Propaganda, heavy-handed preaching, hot-button issues, especially when shoehorned in non-characters whose entire existence is to stand around and be X, and some of this stuff isn't even consistent. What counts as part of the problem can change in a blink. There's honestly no good way to say, please don't do these things that perfectly covers everything. Never mind saying it all without producing a massive list no one will pay attention to. This ties into the second problem. Excuse me, Twitter. No Politics came about on social media. Worse, it was before Twitter raised its length limits. So not only did we have the impossible task of taking a huge, roughly defined list of things and turning it into something quickly understandable, but we had to do it in 140 characters or less. Not possible. Faced with that, and perhaps some knee-jerk reactions for good measure, it's no shock that the whole thing got shorthanded and coded down to no politics. Mind, there's also some people who thinks no politics means no politics at all, and others who mean no politics I don't agree with, but for the bulk of the people, yeah, it's that mess up there. I thought that was this well contextualized, that people were using it as a shorthand for mediums that require shorthand, media that require shorthand, because the list is so long of like individual things that they take issue with that it all got umbrellaed, truncated into a shorthand. Which, okay, well said, Carne. You should start doing videos because you can summarize this stuff much faster than me. Lars the Martin says, I wholeheartedly agree with you on forcefully jamming politics into entertainment. That's got to stop. You earned a like from me. However, I do feel differently about the Bigot sandwich line. My interpretation was that the scene specifically showcased Ellie's persistence in holding a grudge and her inability to forgive. The sandwich dude wasn't completely labeled as the bad guy in that scene when the thematic elements of the game are taken into account. I would consider the line to be completely political if forgiveness wasn't one of the main themes of the game. That's just my opinion, though. I completely understand why people don't like the game. A person's opinion on a piece of entertainment isn't automatically an indication of their personality. And yeah, I read that because, wow, there's someone who can disagree and be good about it. And I like reading comments that disagree when people are good about it and recognize that something is a personal opinion instead of something that defines a human being as something. I personally think you only understand that much later in the game when you find out what Seth actually said. I personally think it was a clunky line that, and this is when we get into sort of the, oh God, remember what Carne said about you have to do something in a shorthand? Bigot sandwiches for me is the shorthand. It is the tangible detail that gets into every other issue I have with that game. And every other issue I have with that game is far too long. I could go on for 2 hours just based on that. And it's partially because the cute, awesome, good-humored Ellie of the first game never comes back. There's no spark of that character at all. So I'll just leave that there. But as Lars the Martian says, it's personal opinion. It doesn't label as someone bad person. If you like the game, if you don't like the game, it's a fucking video game. Again, keep politics out of this stuff. But a lot of people took issues on the Bigot sandwich thing. More on that in a bit. But first, Unimpressed Turtle says, a lot of people talk about how tackling political issues will help gaming to mature as an art form and be taken more seriously by the greater public. However, the people who argue that are the same people who can't handle the political elements of their favorite games being criticized. Their first reaction to even the fairest and most constructive criticism is to attack, belittle, and defame anyone who dares to give their opinion. They cherry-pick the meanest and least educated attacks on their work and act like that is how everyone is discussing it. Not surprisingly, most consumers view this as a very immature way of handling criticism. What proponents of politics and gaming need to realize is they cannot have their cake and eat it too. What point would there be in making more political games if only one type of political stance was ever acceptable? Why would anyone want to discuss politics in video games if all discussions immediately devolved into witch trials? Who in their right mind would want to even mention your game if you accuse them of being an alt-right Nazi incel the moment they describe it as anything other than God's gift to gaming? If journalists and developers really want games to mature as a medium, then they themselves must first mature as people. I thought that was excellently stated. And I do absolutely agree that this demonizing of people who have a different opinion, that was something that, it's interesting because that was something that started in like the shooter generation where this is a weird cyclical thing. And I was around for all of it, which was really bizarre. It was actually, Halo was the first game I was really aware of that people just, if you didn't give it a perfect score, they just descended on you. This horde just consumed you and beat the crap out of you. I found that out when I gave Halo 3 an 8 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10 because I thought the story was pretty weak. And there were other things I wasn't really crazy about. It was a very short campaign. Everything was too pushed into multiplayer, which, of course, when you're reviewing a game during a review period, you cannot properly, you can't review the multiplayer. It's not the conditions for it. It's not, it's not populated with the player base it will be. You can't get a judge of it. So I could only judge it on the campaign and a couple of multiplayer sessions for journalists that felt like super artificial. So, what's funny is that then was like this boomerang effect. The journalists who were super beat up during that period of time just became bitter assholes and started just doing that to everybody else, even though they knew how much it hurt to be beat up on. And that's the thing I don't really understand. I know some of these people went through the same crap I did for daring to have a dissenting opinion, and yet they're beating up on other people for having a dissenting opinion. It makes no sense to me. So thank you for your comment, Unimpressed Turtle, and I very much like your screen name. Operative G. Look, keep politics out of games is mostly about whether or not the politics are external to the game or internal to the game. Art is metaphor. If politics, let me make that clear again. Start over. Look, keep politics out of game is mostly about whether or not the politics are external to the game or internal to the game. Art is metaphor. If politics is part of that metaphor, most people don't mind. If the politics isn't really metaphoric, you're breaking the metaphor. The more stuff in your game that isn't part of that metaphor, the harder it is to invest in that metaphor. So Operative G is basically saying, keep your dissonant politics out of my games. Interesting how adding that one word kind of makes it easier to understand. Siege said about Last of Us 2, it's one of those pieces of media where the closer you look, the more insane it becomes. I've had to just move on to other things. It's too taxing for my mind to continue analyzing it. Some games are a pleasure to dive into. The Last of Us 2 wasn't one of those games. Ghost of Tsushima balances its story and its world so organically and with such subtlety. I didn't think of it till you mentioned it in this video. I was wondering why I was enjoying the game so much. Oh my God, Ghost of Tsushima. Oh my God, that game. That game, like, you have fun, you fly high. There's dark, sad moments, but they work. They work. I felt bad. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel like I was forced to be feeling things. They were legitimate feelings that I didn't have to feel. I could have chosen not to feel. You can feel different things. It's very cool on Twitch. We're debating the various positions of the characters and the moral choices of the characters while we're playing the game. And as I said, like, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. And it's a super cool experience. Like, we're disagreeing on the interpretation, but in a good way. It's so great. 3D Master says also about Tsushima, I think it wouldn't be as dissonant if I had the option as Jin to tell them off and tell them you were as honorable, more honorable even than any sane person, including the criticisms, could expect, and tell them to keep their idiotic opinions to themselves. The dissonance isn't just that they say things that doesn't make any sense. It's the additional lack of being able to call the old fogies out on their bullshit. At least I assume from people who have been saying, I haven't played Ghost yet. Okay, 3D Master, I'll say to you that there's a lot of in the noble classes that Jin is a part of. There's things you just don't do, and there are things you just do, and that's a major part of the conflict between Jin and his uncle. I'll leave it there because I haven't played the game yet. Arve Ericsson's excuse me. I think I see the distinction between propaganda and normal politics. Dragon Age Inquisition did treat Krem heavy-handed enough that even I could spot it, and I went more than a little when they presented Dorian as a legitimately gay character. Dorian was still all right, though. Just hit on me less, please. Right now, well, I say now, I'm playing a game where you can argue that some of the games in the series franchise are commenting on the situation in Japan, with people working such long hours and clocking so much overtime that they died at their workplace. This is politics in my view, and it would be such a delight if it turns out that these games actually save people's lives. Keep that kind of politicking in my games, yeah? And again, it's the heavy-handed stuff. The Dorian was still all right, though. Just hit on me less, please. That reminded me of something that I found really super frustrating in Dragon Age Inquisition, and I got crazy mocked for it at the time, but I had a real bad reaction to the constant sexual harassment that the Iron Bull was engaging in. He was constantly mocking Dorian's masculinity, the whole may just wear a skirt, her thing. And then, you know, he was bragging about his exploits with kitchen wenches. And I actually at one point went, because, you know, BioWare is so pro-social justice, right? I actually went to the kitchen to see if I could find the elf women who worked in the kitchen to see their side of Iron Bull's boasting. And I couldn't do it. And having been a manager who had to deal with some sexual harassment stuff, I'm like, I feel like a really crappy boss as the Inquisitor now, and I don't know what to do about it. And that is not something that everybody is going to feel in that game. I'm just sharing that that's what I felt in that game. And yeah, I guess there aren't that many women who have been senior management who play Dragon Age Inquisition, I guess, because I'm kind of alone in that. Wow, this just made the Iron Bull character significantly less fun. And Sarah being, to me, a very stereotypical kind of immature character made it a lot less fun. I wanted an experience in Dragon Age Inquisition that gave me the sort of sweeping, deep, emotional to the point of cheesy experiences with a same-sex relationship as I get in a lot of the heterosexual relationships in those games. And there's always something to me, other than Zevran, in Dragon Age Origins. I enjoyed that storyline. I enjoyed Fenris' storyline in Dragon Age 2 when I played as a male champion. But I mean, Fenris was freaking tragic, right? But I still kind of bought it for the delightful cheese that it was. I didn't get that experience in Dragon Age Inquisition unless I was playing as Cullen or Solus. And both those characters are essentially racist. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. You know, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, these characters. And I'm like, are they racist? Solus is definitely racist. Cullen is, you know, other races other than elf and human, just not his type. I mean, I don't know. And these are the sorts of things where I'm like, why? You know? And I don't think it's an illegitimate choice to give characters flaws. I was just like, I find these stories so interesting, and yet that's still in the back of my head, and I don't know. It just and that's the sort of thing where I want to be taken away to another world, not constantly being reminded of this world and all the P's and Q's I have to mind. And it was the Iron Bull and the like polyamorous, polyamorous pansexual thing, though it was only pansexual. He didn't actually love anybody, kind of, sort of. But it was so shallow. Like, oh, he's pansexual, so everything's about sex, mostly. And it's like, we finally get to experience a Dragon Age game as a Canary playable character. And it's shallow. It was so disappointing. Back to the Bigot sandwiches. Walter Biggenback says, I don't understand why people are getting in a tizzy over Bigot sandwiches. A tizzy. It is confirmed within the game that said character acted like a bigot to said two characters who are both overtly emotional teens. You don't want forced propaganda or to view characters through a specific lens? Then why are you playing a linear game that is purposefully through these characters' viewpoints? Her responding in a way seems like a response from a shitty kid who has every right to question the validity of a man who decided this was the worth talking about in the first place. This is a game whose themes and events are putting us versus them mentality to a forefront in a town that isn't so much at risk, where people have the ability to watch movies and fucking have concerts. Where's a concert? It would make sense that certain viewpoints would come to clash. This is just basic human characterization. This happens in groups. Just because a character responds in a certain way that you dislike or reflects a group that you dislike doesn't make it propaganda. It makes that an all caps character trait. How is saying this is how that line framed this game for me, getting into a tizzy? It couldn't possibly be that this big defender of this game could possibly have some biases when it comes to the viewpoints of certain people. Just saying, I should be able to say how a particular element of a game impacted my lens on the game without being accused of getting into a tizzy, which is what they said about women in the 1950s. Anyway, moving on. Drowning Clown. My thoughts on your point about feeling unaccepted by any community. I would argue that it's a matter of perspective. Most people place the onus on the community to be welcoming, but what ends up being more realistic is that you yourself as an individual have preconceived notions about those communities. You said you're either too much or not enough. Is it the community placing those parameters on yourself? A lot of people forget that the individual is the smallest minority. People with left-leaning ideologies would have you believe that they are for the protection of minorities and inclusivity, yet still treat them as a monolith devoid of any individuality. I'll go back to when I started in games, okay? People are going to find this hard to believe now, but when I first started in games, I was treated as a bimbo who was sort of a poser, because I was on TV and people gave me a hard time because, oh, she couldn't do that for a living and possibly like video games. And so, I mean, oh God, this was, I don't want to think about how long ago that was. 15 years ago? Slightly less? Oh God. But I got, when I tried to voice my opinion on something, it was, well, you're a girl. Of course you think that. I know. People said that in video game journalism circles back then. I don't think that's a matter of perspective. I think that when I came into video games, it was much more hostile to women. And certainly much more hostile to women who were seen as sort of conventionally attractive. That framed my perspective on the whole thing. When people are like, you do not belong here, you feel like you don't belong, right? That's not a preconceived notion. I felt punched in the face the first few times that happened. And that's why I have the perspective I do now, that things have gotten so much better than when I started. And the people who are complaining about their treatment, I'm not saying there aren't valid complaints. It's just people who have gotten into gaming, especially the gaming community in the last 5 years or so, have no idea how bad it used to be. That doesn't make poor behavior now right, just a sense of perspective. Final comment before I do a follow-up on the Rocksteady story. Carmen Durda, I feel like calling, you know how I feel like? I feel like calling the killing of Nora racialized violence is racist AF. That means as fuck. Her death and even torture has nothing to do with her race. She called Joel a little bitch and had valuable information. She could have been any race or gender and nothing would change at all. Except it's, other than a couple of dogs and Joel, it's the most brutally violent death in the game. And they chose to make the third most brutally violent death in the game a black woman, when violence against black women is somewhat more normalized than violence against other type of people. When you look at the supporting characters who are utterly brutalized, other than Joel, they are strangely, I'm trying to think, Yara's situation was pretty awful too. But I mean, you don't have to press buttons to cut off Yara's arm, right? You have to press buttons to beat Nora to death. You're not able to take out a gun and shoot her, do it quick. The game forces you to kill her in an unnecessarily brutal fashion, and she was already dying of spores anyway. That matters. It's not just that she was killed. It's that she was killed in an extremely violent way. And this is the thing, that somebody has an opinion that somebody doesn't like. And so, I don't want to think about your comments about something being something that means I don't have to like the game. Therefore, I'm going to call you a bigot. I'll read the first comment again. I feel like calling the killing of Nora racialized violence is racist as fuck. They don't support the accusation of racism at all. It's just, I feel like it. They claim her death and even torture has nothing to do with her race. All right, fine. Why is it racist to say it's unnecessarily brutally violent and it's happening against a black woman when Black Lives Matter is all over the news? There's obviously an issue with violence and, against people of color, against black people. I'm not going to say people of color anymore, because you know what? It's against black people, with Hispanics as a second. But it's a particular race that has violence committed on them more often. Don't get on me on that black on black stuff. No. There's problems. And when a game that claims to be so politically something goes there, it is not racist to be disturbed. People have got to stop throwing those labels around as if they don't really damage a person. That is a very serious accusation, and you actually have to provide, there's a fairly high bar. And, there are people who are like, intent doesn't matter. Intent absolutely does matter. How you deal with someone who just slipped up or didn't know the connotations behind a word or a picture or whatever is very different than someone who damn well knew and did it anyway. Like, for instance, I was really upset when Ice Cube tweeted an image I considered to be anti-Semitic. Now, he went on Ari Melber's show. You guys know I love Ari. But he went on Ari Melber's show and he said that he did not understand the anti-Semitic coding in the image. He just saw white people treating black people as objects, and he didn't realize that the way the white people were drawn were designating Jews. I believe him. And as much as it still stung to see somebody who I like doing that, I take him at his word that he didn't know, because I have no reason not to. Because quite frankly, it really makes more sense that someone just didn't know than someone knew and did it deliberately. I mean, that's not the same as what Nick Cannon did when he had the opportunity to walk it back and didn't. When he had the opportunity to apologize and didn't. I think we have to take people at their word when they say they really didn't know the connotations behind something, because people don't get taught this stuff outside of certain communities, right? Like, people don't, just because the internet trolls sees on those images doesn't mean people live on the internet. It doesn't mean they know, right? We have to be fair about this stuff. And speaking of fair, my Rocksteady coverage. Fortunately, yay, I was correct to be concerned about that Guardian article. Shortly after that Guardian article came out, multiple women who signed that original letter in 2018 sent another statement via the company that they believe, still being at the company, that things have gotten much better, and they feel heard and they feel considered, and they actually felt like their privacy was violated by somebody leaking that letter, because they were assured confidentiality when they made the complaint. And maybe that's something I'm going to have to hold over till next week. Confidentiality, when it's okay, when it's not okay. But I like it when I see red flags and that stuff, and it turns out it was right to think critically. It was right to have pause. Give pause to the whole thing. You're not a bad person for not believing every story. You do sort of need a reason to go, I see red flags. You can't just go, she's lying, or he's lying. They're lying. The same way you can't just dismiss someone as a bigot because you got upset that I thought bigot sandwiches was a clunky line. Also, someone can say something stupid when they're angry drunk and not really have hate in their heart. I know it sounds strange, but people are strange. So we're going to go into another week. I just suddenly hit a wall. Like, I'm really tired now. It's been a long week. The Patreon's got some video about why everything I've been doing right now behind the scenes. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.